Ladies and gents, this is ML's Like Teen Spirit. Today we've got Barbara back with us. Barbara, welcome back.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me one more time.
You're always welcome. Barbara, today I wanted you to help us go on a bit of a journey, an attribution journey. So you've got a perspective on the type of path companies take and like what happens to them at each stage. And I was hoping you would help me today go through some of these phases. My goal is to describe each of them with you and understand some of the problems there, so that hopefully someone wandering in and watching this video will feel like they're not alone, because lots of companies sit at different places of the journey and have these different problems. So can we start it off, please? It was from a piece of work that you put together. We'd like to go through step by step. So where does this series of phases start, please?
Well, first of all, I think it's great that you're highlighting this piece. I think this really also highlights it to myself how it's perhaps something I should also write like a more throughout article on it, because it is a journey that I see companies repeat over and over again. I have a call with a client and I can remember pinpoint, okay, you are like a map in amusement park. I'm like, yeah, you are here. And also a lot of the times I'm like, you need to be here, but they need to go through all of these steps themselves to realize that's what they need to do. So I don't, a company doesn't usually come to me in the first step. There is like a certain point where they go like, okay, we need the help of an expert. But I would say the first step is, a company, it can be like a one person company, someone that's just starting out. They want to run some campaigns and they're like, okay, I'm not going to be bothered with, setting conversions up. Who knows if it works? I will see. So they just launch something. So I would say, phase one is doing marketing, not thinking about the results, because yeah, it's the difference between 0 or 1 lead. You don't need to be setting up pixels for that.
Yeah. Well, we're looking at the startups of the world. When you first start something off, you're kind of like, let's get some things running,
Mm-hmm.
start pouring some dollars in. Well, and then what happens, Barbara? Where does this phase end of like, hey, your platforms are running, your ads are out there? Like, what's the evolution of this phase?
Yeah, I don't. So again, like that's not necessarily the part that I'm working with. With the company, I think is when the company starts to have more people, and it's not just like the founder that was responsible for things. Numbers start to become something that people want to hear more, and they want to understand how things are going. Perhaps they've hired a marketer person that wants to yeah, measure things, so they set this up. I often, and then I have, this attribution masterclass that I plugged in the last podcast. John, feel free to plug it again if you would like. But basically, one of the things that, we see startups making a mistake is launching too many channels at the same time. You know, if you are small, you should figure out what works and then exhaust that. You shouldn't have to be worrying about measuring all of these different things. Because if it's not clear that they're working, then they're probably not working, and you're better off, figuring out what works first. But that's more of like, I guess, a side comment, but that's, a marketing decision that leads company to be in data problems. But but basically they're having these campaigns, and then they start to track things with the app platforms. Facebook says install this pixel, Google Ads says install this, and then they install everything, and now they have some numbers.
All right. What would that new head of marketing see? They'd see
Yeah,
what?
that then your marketing is going to see conversions coming from different sources, and it will usually lead them to adding these conversions together, not really take into consideration. And that is when you start spending more, that there is a probable duplication within the data. Because, depending on also if you're doing like a campaign on Meta, you're reaching a lot of people, then you're also targeting them, on Google Ads. There's a chance that, someone is looking at an ad on Meta, then searching for something on Google Ads, and they're converting. And then both ad platforms are saying to you, hey, we have a conversion.
Got it. So then the marketer is struggling to explain results or feeling more uncertain at this point. Where do they take this? Like what
They take
happens next
this.
in the journey?
Yeah, I think they take to the data team. Maybe the founder takes to the data team and they say, like, hey, guys, we need to have one source that tells us how many conversions are coming from each different marketing initiative that we do. You know, usually companies start with Google Analytics.
Let's zoom in on the data team because it's kind of my home a little bit.
Yeah.
What are some of the things they find difficult based on what you've seen?
I think like a difficulty that happens within this is that the data team doesn't necessarily have the context of how marketing works. So like the next step that happens here is the direct consequence of that lack of marketing knowledge from the data team. Because we talked a bit on the last podcast about click-based attribution and cross device and all of that, and we also talked a bit like about dark social. But overall, I think we can all agree is that there's loads of marketing initiatives that could be bringing conversions that are not going to be necessarily measured in a direct click-based model. So if you are using GA4 or anything else that's purely click-based, it doesn't really matter if it's Pickwick or Snowplow or Simple Analytics, whatever you're using. If it's click-based and it's using cookies or browser IDs or something like that to stitch these conversions together, like all of these sources are not going to show as being responsible for conversions. So then, maybe the company starts using J4, maybe like they go on to build their own multi-touch attribution model. They're like thinking about, how do we define a session? Which touch points get the credit? Are we going to use Markov? Are we going to, they're going down like this rabbit hole of like finding the perfect MTA. And then they're like, yeah, we've invested loads of resources, really smart people on the data team. We're working on this. So this is the truth. And then, and then marketers make budget decisions based on this data. And that's when I come in usually because things go wrong.
Take us there, Barbara. Take us to some of these horror stories. No brands, please. But can you give an example of like, I don't know, some misplaced spend or something you've uncovered that was really insightful for a brand?
Oh,
You've got
John.
hundreds of examples.
Hundreds. That's the most common thing because that's the biggest risk you have. When it's the biggest risk is you end up in a situation where you have trust in the data, but it's the wrong data. That is the biggest risk. And with marketing campaigns, then the risk of that is budget, is spending. Yeah, I think like something that at least I see people being more aware on LinkedIn now, but still not as much, is like incrementality, right? So a common mistake companies do when after they've gotten back this first phase of MTA is they go on to invest all of their budget on paid search, because that's the channel that is click based, has conversions that occur faster, is within the same device, is in the same browser that paid search ticks all of these boxes. That makes it easy to attribute. So it shows in the MTA as the source of conversions, and then budgets go like, man, like affiliates are not working, social is not working, content is not working. Let's cut all of that and let's put it all on paid search. And then, sales goes like this.
Hmm. Let's rewind a little bit to the data team, because I was fascinated by the ideas there. Can you tell me, based on your consulting jobs, I'm familiar with this type of challenge being brought to the data team. It's probably true that I never really suffered a build in this space myself. Like, John,
Yeah.
you got to fix this. Like, I took other platforms for doing analytics and stuff like this. What kind of duration is it for a data team to, don't know, come up with an answer when confronted with the challenge of, guys, we want to have a unified source and we want to have a
Yeah.
methodology on top.
Yeah.
Is this 30 days until V1? Or Barbara, are people wasting 9 months on this type of project? Like, what kind of
Yeah,
timescales?
I've seen. Yeah, they're wasting a very long time. A lot of the times, I've seen MTA projects take longer than 6 months, and I think more than that, I've seen millions being shifted on paid search strategies that weren't incremental. I think and we're moving where this is also becoming more of a risk in certain ways because you have more and more ad platforms running these black box strategies like Performance Max and Advantage Plus and things like that, where the marketer doesn't is not selecting what they're running. The reporting is extremely obscure, and they're just seeing these conversions there happening. So they're shifting budget based on that. And sometimes, these are just people that we're going to convert anyway.
So what tip do you have? So if you're just a marketer and kind of
Yeah.
the business wants something, like data guys are part of the solution to look at this
Mm-hmm.
information. Methodology is part of it. So if you're doing lots of digital, it's MTA product or in-house or whatever you've built. And then you're left with this situation of, I don't know, marketer doesn't really have much control over it. Like,
Yeah.
data says this. Um, where does a marketer go from here? Like, what should they? I'm trying to steer. Should they be doing MTA plus incrementality testing? Like, what would be sort of things they put together at the end of this journey to kind of I don't know, understand this more fully? What would your tip be?
Yeah, it will heavily depend on multiple factors that are specific to the business and the marketing campaigns that they're running. Overall, I think what's important here is, in instead of trying to pick a one size fits all measurement solution, is try to think about what is the goal of your campaign and then come up with a way of measuring that. And that's the part that the data team can be really helpful. It can be really helpful, supporting them and running incremental tests. It can be really helpful them finding, additional sources of data. Also now with AI, there's more and more analysis being done on things like sales calls where you can extract, insights on marketing from there. So the data team should be really helping, the marketing team think creatively about how to measure these solutions. And then alongside that, it comes back to understanding what metrics you're looking at. If you know how click based attribution works, then you're going to be a bit skeptical of using just that to measure paid search campaigns. And then that will lead you to work with the data team on being more creative. So these two things are entwined.
Got you. So it's kind of iterative, picking the right solution for the measurement goal rather than building the perfect solution that
Yeah.
helps you with everything.
And that is also difficult, because not by itself. What's difficult is there is, stakeholders that are going like, yeah, I want a source of truth, I want this, I want of that. And it's a difficult pushback exercise by everyone.
Tell me more. So this the communication element must be something you're focused on as a consultant.
Yeah.
Um, what tips do you have for, I don't know, head of marketing is overseeing this complex world?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the CEO wants to know something. Yeah, how are we performing, or what do we need to do? Like, are there any don't know, are there any observations you've made from doing this as a job, or where you've seen like super expert marketers kind of lead the change? Like, is there anything you can think of as a top
Yeah,
tip?
I always think, I always, my approach, I guess it's also comes from my startup background, is, think of these things as MVPs. Don't try to sell like a whole shebang of attribution things. Like, you want to get buy-in, you want to show like why these things matter. Start with a small test and then build confidence so you can scale from there. And that can be, one-off incremental tasks, like, before you go on to pay for all these solutions, just do something yourself. It can be as simple as sending a survey, like a type form to new users, like think small so you can prove why the things you're working on matter so you can scale.
Barbara, amen to that. I am a guy that has lived through big data. Okay, like I'm
Yeah, yeah,
old enough to remember this era when data would kind of bring a new frontier. And guess what?
yeah, same.
Nothing
Yeah,
changed. We always had big data. We still have it today.
yeah.
Many of the problems are still there. So, Barbara, look, thanks for taking us through that, and thanks for
Yeah.
those tips and insights into this world. Ladies and gents, this has been ML's Like Team Spirit.